NASCAR concludes day one of next-gen testing at the Charlotte Oval. Jimmie Johnson will officially run full-time at IndyCar in 2022, and Deegan will be returning DJR racing in the NASCAR Camp World Truck Series in 2022. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We've got a ton of NASCAR, IndyCar, and other stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start off with some paint scheme news. The first paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Austin's 2022 discount tire scheme that we're going to see in 2022 for 13 races. This paint scheme looks really good in my opinion. I'm not overall the biggest fan of the number being moved forward, but I do think of all the paint schemes that have been revealed, this has been one of the best paint schemes. And I think Team Penske has been one of the best companies, especially when it comes to the numbers being moved forward. They did a really good job utilizing the number placement, and I think they did a really good job on this paint scheme. I'm looking forward to see it. I think they did a really excellent job, and I'm looking forward to see it out on the racetrack for 13 races in 2022. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Kurt Busch's 2022 Monster Energy scheme. That's the one that likely we're going to see in 2022. This one, no doubt, is overall a better paint scheme than the one that we saw when it was revealed in August, when it was announced that Kurt Busch will be going over to 2311 Racing for 2022. And this paint scheme, they do a really good job. And I think it's not as good as a discount tire paint scheme, but I think they did a really good job on the paint scheme overall for what they have. It looks really solid, and it's a really nice looking car. I'm looking forward to see this one out on the racetrack in 2022 in the Cup Series season. The next paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Daniel Suarez's 2021 K1 Speed scheme that we're going to see in 2022 most likely. This is also seen at the Next Gen test. I think they did a really good job. I think Trackhouse has done an excellent job in 2020. So especially when it comes to their 2022 paint schemes, I think done an excellent job. And I think Kyle Sachs has been one of the biggest reasons why they've done an excellent job on their paint scheme reveals. So overall, I think it looks really solid, looks really good, and I'm looking forward to see this paint scheme out on the racetrack in 2022. And the final paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Brad Keselowski's 2021-2022 Kohler Generator scheme that we're going to see this upcoming season. This paint scheme is not as good as the other paint schemes we talked about today. I don't and really have never been a big fan of the Kohler Generator schemes. They don't look really great. I think this one actually looks a little bit worse than the one we saw last year for Ryan Newman. It's not terrible, don't get me wrong, but it really isn't overall that amazing. But it is what it is. Again, it's a good paint scheme we're going to have to see in 2022, so we're going to have to get used to it. Hopefully, we'll see this maybe will provide some really good results, and hopefully we'll see some good results from this paint scheme in 2022. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the truck race sponsor for Circuit of the Americas. As it was announced today that the title sponsor has been revealed, and it's going to be XPEL 225. I do believe the truck series, the last time he raced her, I think it was a Toyota 225, but I thought this was that. But I think it once again will be the XPEL 225. I really like the name a lot. I think it's really cool, and they're great to see that XPEL is stepping up. I think they sponsored a couple races here over the last couple of years, so I think it's really awesome to see that a company is stepping up and once again sponsoring the truck series. I believe that it was sponsored was the Toyota 225 last year, so it looks like they're changing up the truck series sponsor for this race. But I think it looks really solid. I like the name a lot, and I'm overall looking forward to see this one because out on the racetrack. Great to see that is going to be the sponsor for the Truck Series race at Circuit of the Americas. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about DC Solar. It was reported by Bob Pockers a couple days ago that pending court approval, NASCAR will pay the DC Solar bankruptcy trustee $5.75 million to then be returned to investors' covered debts. For 2016 through 2018, DC Solar had paid $15,095,406 to NASCAR ISC tracks in sponsorship, while NASCAR had paid $8,538,447.97 for solar generators. In my opinion, I feel like NASCAR is getting ripped off. And to give a little bit of backstory on the situation in regards to what has been going on with DC Solar a couple years ago was caught for basically being a really fraudulent company. They have sponsored many NASCAR tracks, and it's also sponsored Chip Ganassi Racing. But they basically were caught on, I think it was on a Christmas raid in 2018. It was going to 2019, and Ross Chastain was supposed to drive the 42 car with DC Solar sponsored by them. And then they got Christmas Eve raid in December 24th of 2018. And then basically Chip Ganassi Racing's Xfinity Series team had to shut down in 2019. I also think this affected Chip Ganassi Racing's performance in 2019 as well. But it's a little, I feel like NASCAR is getting a little bit ripped off here. NASCAR really should not have to pay at all because, in my opinion, they weren't the ones that caused the situation. it was DC Solar. And Jeff Karpoff and this group should be basically required to pay that back, because Jeff Karpoff, of course, basically just got put into jail. But in my opinion, I am not overall the biggest fan that DC Solar is NASCAR's having to pay this, because in my opinion, I think it's ridiculous that they have to overall pay them this. So I think it's stupid, in my opinion. That's really, really frustrating. I'm not an overall big fan that they have to pay, but that's what's been going on with DC Solar. We're going to have to keep an eye on what goes on with DC Solar long-term down the road. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Lyons, as Lyons revealed their top 10 diecast for the 2021 season. In first place, we have Kevin Harvick's number 4 Gravedigger that was ran at Nashville. In number 2, we have Kyle Larson's 5 Champion car. In number 3, we have Chase Elliott's Napa car. And number 4, Kyle Larson's Phoenix one, which is basically the same as the Champion car. And number 5, we have Tyler Reddick's 8 United for America, which is definitely really, really surprising. In number 6, we have Chase Elliott's Hooters. In number 7, we have Chase Elliott's Coda win. In number 8, we have Kyle Larson's Las Vegas win. In number 9, we have Chase Elliott's Hooters throwback scheme that we saw at Darlington and for the throwback race. And at number 10 is Bubba Wallace's Talladega win. There are definitely some really, really big surprises. Number 1, the Gravedigger scheme. I'm a little surprised that Kyle Larson's Champion car, especially that one, did not beat that. But the Gravedigger one, I'm not also surprised that that had a lot of sales, because a lot of people see Gravedigger and they're going to see it. Plus, I do think it was one of overall the best paint schemes that was revealed in 2021 and ones we saw on the track. I thought it looked really, really solid and looked really, really good. Other big surprise, Tyler Reddick being in the top 5. That paint scheme, though, looked really, really good and looked really, really great. But I'm not surprised to see that Kyle Larson was on there with some paint schemes and Chase Elliott. Basically, the list was majority Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson, who are arguably the 2 best drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series. So that does not overall surprise me that Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott were both on the list. I'm just a little bit surprised that Kyle Larson's Champion car was not higher than Kevin Harvick's Gravedigger car. But that Gravedigger car, man, looked absolutely incredible. So it is what it is, but that is your top 10 revealed Lyons diecast for 2021. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about National Fairgrounds. It was reported by Bob Pockers that Bristol has announced community initiatives in coordination with the proposed National Fairgrounds project, plus comments to a $15.50 per hour minimum wage rate for all full-time, part-time, and event staff. This, in my opinion, is really, really cool that they're doing this. So basically, they're trying to get communities out there, because they're at this moment, remember, National is basically, they've agreed to something. Well, they haven't entirely agreed to this, but it is likely that the board is going to approve of what's going to happen. So currently, NASCAR and Bristol at the moment, until it gets approved, but it's not, again, it's not approved right now. But right now, there is a very strong possibility that National Fairgrounds could be coming back in the next couple years. But a lot of the National residents have been really outspokenly been against the National Fairgrounds making its return. So what Bristol is trying to do, and what they're trying to do here, is they're trying to reach out to the communities to try to fix the problems that the communities have had with the race, and try to say, hey, we have something that we maybe will work out for everybody, and it will work out long ways so that fans can be really, really happy. What the track's expecting to do is they're expecting to bring some mufflers into tracks to mitigate sound. They're also planning to build a sound barrier above the track to basically mitigate all the sound at the same time as well. So I think that that is something that is really, really cool initiative that they're doing for the National Fairgrounds. So again, it's frustrating that fans, because again, the track's been there since 1905, but I'm glad that at least Bristol, what they're doing here is trying to get outreach to the fans, and hopefully there'll be more about this soon, and hopefully this will get approved from the board, but I think it will get approved from the Fair Board Council. I think that's going to happen, and the commission should hopefully approve this soon, and at least Bristol's going out there and trying to reach out. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Brandon Lyons. As Brandon Lyons will be spotting for William Byron in 2022. It was already announced that Tabloid, who had been William Byron's sponsor in 2021, that he'd be moving over to spot for Ricky Stenhouse Jr. for 2022. Brandon Lyons was the spotter for Ryan Preece in 2021. So basically what's going on here is you're basically having a swap where you're swapping the JC Doherty Racing spotters, and you're basically spotting him for William Byron, and basically spotting him for Hendrick Motorsports spotters. So Brandon Lyons is definitely an interesting pickup, because like I said, he had been spotting for Ryan Preece in 2021. So I don't entirely know how good of a spotter he is, because I don't know how much experience Brandon Lyons has. I think he started spotting for Ryan Preece back, I think, in 2019. So he has been spotting for a couple years now. But let's be for real, that 37 car that Ryan Preece is in was not overall the most spectacular car out there. So we really were never going to be able to get a great indication on how good of a spotter he is. But at the same time, I think this is a great pickup for Hendrick Motorsports, and hopefully going into next year, we can see Brandon Lyons do a great job for the Hendrick Motorsports camp. So I'm really, really excited about this, and that is who will be spotting for William Byron in 2022. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the upcoming next-gen Daytona test. It was revealed from Daytona that fans will be allowed at the next-gen car test at Daytona on January 11th. Now, fans are not going to be allowed for the second day, but they'll be allowed for the first day. And the good news is, just like the Phoenix test, it will be free for all fans to attend this test. This is really, really cool initiative that Daytona is doing, considering when that test happens, they're going to be less than a month technically from the season starting. Because remember, the season is going to start on February 6th. So we're really not that far away technically from the season starting once this test takes place. They're basically going to be testing a super speed package, and whatever package ends up going through is what they're going to end up using. They'll probably test a couple different configurations, similar to what they're doing right now in Charlotte. They'll probably test a few different configurations of what the horsepower of the next-gen car will be at super speedways. That's something that we're going to have to see what happens there. But like I said, I'm overall extremely excited to see that they're going to be allowing fans in. I think it's really important, especially for fans that are going there. I think it's really, really important to have fans there. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm happy to see that NASCAR and Daytona are going to be allowing fans. They are allowing fans also for day one of the Phoenix next-gen test. Right now, they're not letting fans in for the Charlotte test right now because there's a Christmas parties and Christmas lights out there because they have Christmas parties going on in the evenings at Charlotte. So it makes a lot of sense why they're not allowing fans there, because of the Christmas lights and stuff. But I wish they would allow them, but it is what it is. And it's really cool to see that they are allowing fans in for the next-gen test, at least day one of the next-gen test at Daytona. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Mike Harmon Racing. Now, Mike Harmon Racing basically recently had their appeal, and unfortunately, they have lost their appeal with NASCAR. The $50,000 fine has been transferred from Ryan Bell, who was a crew chief for this team, and who will get a suspension as well, over to car owner Mike Harmon, who also lost 50 owner points as well. The reason that this team had to appeal and tried to appeal is because of the fact that this team had a new generation, the base of the car that ran at Phoenix. They had it at a charity event at Rockingham. Now, it doesn't matter if it's a charity event or not. You're technically still testing, and they basically, the reason that they got caught, again, I thought the penalty was really, really harsh, penalty they were getting. But the reason that they are in trouble and why they basically lost their appeal is they posted on social media. If you're going to do something like this, why post this on social media? I get you have a lot of fans, and Mike Harmon Racing has a lot of fans, and a lot of people are defending Mike Harmon Racing overall for what happened. But if you want my honest and sincere opinion about it, Mike Harmon Racing should get the penalties. They posted on social media. It's their fault that they got in trouble. Again, I get that people are upset that Mike Harmon Racing got a penalty for what happened. But like I said, in my honest and sincere opinion, Mike Harmon Racing completely screwed up. They posted it on social media, and you can't just post it on social media. They got themselves in trouble, and they're the only people to blame for it. They basically have a GoFundMe going on, which they want to do a GoFundMe. That's perfectly fine. But I will say, and I'll agree with a lot of people, I think the penalty is way too harsh. I don't think that they should get 50 owner's points taken off and driver's points taken off for Mike Harmon. And I also don't think that they should have a $50,000 fine. I also don't agree that Ryan Bell should be suspended for 6 races. I think the races do need to be basically limited. I think it needs to be dropped from 6 to maybe 1 or 2 points paying races. And maybe the fine drops maybe 10 to 15 grand at the most. And then basically maybe don't take as many owner points away. I think it's a little bit excessive and ridiculous that is the penalties that are going on. I think it's a little frustrating. Again, it's a little frustrating because, again, I think that their way that they basically, but the way they did it is frustrating. But at the same time, it really is their fault that they got in trouble for it, and it really is their fault, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the ARCA Racing TV broadcast schedule for 2022. The season is going to kick off at Daytona and will be on FS1 at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, followed by Phoenix on MAF TV at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Then at Talladega when they race there, it'll be on Fox Sports 1 at 1 p.m. Eastern. Then at Kansas, it'll also be on FS1, and it'll be during the afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern, followed by Charlotte, which will also be on FS1 at 6 p.m. Eastern. Then Iowa Speedway, which we're going back to Iowa once again, they'll be on MAF TV at 9 p.m. Eastern, followed by Berlin Speedway on MAF TV at 8 p.m. Eastern. Then they'll go to Elko Speedway on which will be on MAV TV at 10 p.m. Eastern, and then Middle Howell and Pocono both on FS1. Middle Howell will be at 5 p.m. Eastern, and Pocono will also be on FS1 at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, followed by Indianapolis Raceway Park, that also will be on Fox Sports 1 at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Michigan Speedway will be on MAV TV at 6 p.m. Eastern, and then Watkins Glen will be on Fox Sports 1 at 6 p.m. Eastern. Followed by Springfield, which will be at 2 p.m. Eastern on MAV TV. Then Milwaukee will also be on MAV TV at 3 p.m. Eastern. And then DuQuoin will be on MAV TV at 9 p.m. Eastern. Then at Kansas Speedway, the second race, that will be on MAV TV at 7 p.m. Eastern. And then Bristol will be the final race on FS1 at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. And then the final two races, Salem will be on MAV TV at 7 p.m. Eastern. And then Toledo will end the season on MAV TV at 4 p.m. Eastern. So there will be 9 Fox Sports 1 races, and there will be 11 MAV TV races. The good news is every race is going to be on TV. That's a really, really big positive right there. The negatives is that there are more races behind a paywall and more races subscriptions. I would like to see FS1 in the future get all the ARCA races. And one thing that will help, especially because MAV TV is not as big of a network as FS1, I think the more races they get off FS1, the more of a reach it's going to have. The ARCA races don't really get big enough ratings as it is. And I know that the MAV TV ratings probably only get a quarter of what the races do end up getting on FS1. So in my opinion, if you want to know the truth, I personally believe that all the races should be on FS1 long-term down the road. Maybe a couple extra races maybe end up, of course, going on maybe FS1, be on a couple races on a MAV TV that really they can't get, like Toledo or DuQuoin. But I think especially all the big races, like all the Kansas races, Milwaukee, especially that race, they need to try to find a way, because NASCAR is not really going on at times at some of these races. If they have NASCAR going on, they really can't do anything about that. But I do personally believe that as many races they can, they need to get them on Fox Sports 1. I think having races behind a paywall and behind subscription is really, really frustrating. I know that's really not a subscription to begin with, but I personally believe that they need to try the best they can. They need to try to get as many races on FS1 as possible. That's a little bit frustrating, but it overall is what it is. And now we're going to head and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Mason Massey. As Mason Massey will be driving the 91 for DGM Racing in 2022 for a majority of the season. The number of races were not revealed, but like I just mentioned, Mason Massey will drive for a majority of races. Mason Massey, for the last couple years, has raced for BJ McLeod Motorsports, and I'm going to be perfectly honest, his stats have not been entirely that impressive. However, I will give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt. I do not believe that BJ McLeod's equipment in 2020, 2021 as good as I think what it's going to be in 2022. I do believe that BJ McLeod Motorsports is going to get a little bit of upgrades going into 2022. I also think that they had a lot of cars in the field, which is probably one reason why they haven't been as good as they have been in previous years. That being said, my expectations for Mason Massey are really not through the roof. I think for him, though, his goal is to try to finish in the top 25 and try to get some top 20 as well. Because I've seen the DGM cars do pretty well as in the past. I've seen Josh Williams run in top 10s and top 15s in the past. I know some of those races have been wreckfest when he's ran in top 10s and top 15s. But I've seen him legitimately have top 10 and top 15 equipment at points of DGM cars. I've seen Alex Abey, who most likely will be in the 36 again next year. I've seen him do extremely well in those cars as well. So, again, in my expectations for Mason Massey are not overall through the roof right now, because, again, I'm not sure how he's going to do, because I don't know how much experience he has. There have been talk maybe Jed Nolan was going to get in this car, but I don't think Jed Nolan's going to be in here. But really cool. I'm really happy that Mason Massey is getting another opportunity. I do think it is a little bit of an upgrade, though, from BJ McLeod Motorsports, from 2021 BJ McLeod Motorsports to DGM 2022. But hopefully he'll do very, very well next year, and good luck to him heading into 2022, because he's going to need it. It's a really, really tough field, a lot of competition Xfinity next year, and hopefully he'll do good enough next year to get a good opportunity in 2022, and hopefully do really, really well next year. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about James Hinchcliffe. As was just announced about 25-30 minutes ago, that James Hinchcliffe is going to join the NBC Sports booth for IMSA and IndyCar in 2022. A couple days ago, James Hinchcliffe revealed that he would not be returning to full-time competition in IndyCar in 2022, but did not rule out the possibility of coming back for a few select IndyCar races in 2022. James Hinchcliffe, I think, is a major, major pickup for NBC, because Paul Tracy, he's not going to be returning to the IndyCar and IMSA booths in 2022, as he's going to be focusing on some other endeavors going into next year, and other racing endeavors and other endeavors going into 2022. James Hinchcliffe last year commentated the SRX, and I think he did an excellent job. So I think that this absolutely 100% is a major, major pickup. He's also had a TV gig in the past. He did pit reporting, I think, in 2020, and I think he did, like I said, he did SRX commentary in 2021 for 2 races. And like I said, when the 2 races that he did, I think of all the commentators that were in the booth between Dario Franchitti, James Hinchcliffe, and Danica Patrick, I think he was the best commentator. When he and Alan Best worked together last year in the SRX, I think he did an excellent and a really, really great job. So I think that NBC just got the big pickup. It also would not shock me if he does cover some NASCAR races next year, if they do bring him over to NASCAR in a couple races next year, possibly. Maybe for the championship race, they bring him over. I really don't know. But like I said, he actually has also commentated back in the Atlanta. When he's an Atlantic driver, he actually commentated a couple Champ Car races in 2007. And I just heard his voice from the Cleveland race, and man, he did an excellent job. So like I just said, this is a massive pickup for NASCAR, for IndyCar and NBC and IMSA as well. I think he has a lot of insight, a lot of great information, and like I said, he brings a lot of energy to the booth, and that's one thing that IndyCar does a really good job is they bring a lot of energy, but he also can be funny, but he also is someone that does a really good job and takes his job extremely seriously. So like I just said, I'm really excited to see that he is going to be joining the NBC IndyCar booth and IMSA booth in 2022. I think this is a great pickup, and I'm looking forward to see what he's going to be able to do in 2022 because I think he's going to do really, really great next year. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Logan Sergeant. As Logan Sergeant, it was announced he'll be driving for Carlin Racing in Formula 2 in 2022. Logan Sergeant is a Williams development driver. Last year he drove in Formula 3 and had a really, really strong season. Now, Logan Sergeant, I think, is our best opportunity. We had a chance maybe Colin Hurd was going to come over and run in Formula 1 if Andretti was to buy up the Sauber team. Michael J. revealed that was going to be the case. But we have a homegrown driver currently in the Formula ranks in the United States right now, and that is Logan Sergeant. When you talk about talent, Logan Sergeant is an extremely immense and a really, really great talent. The guys know what he's doing, and he's been coming up for the ranks. And when you talk to people inside the industry and people who know about racing, everybody says that Logan Sergeant is the guy to go to because, like I mentioned, he is extremely good. And like I said, my expectations from going to next year are going to be really, really high because Carlin Racing is one of the best teams right now. They are a very strong and a very, very competent team. So he's going to have really, really high expectations because, like I said, Carlin Racing is a team that's won championships. They won championships and contended for championships in Formula 2 with guys like Max Chilton in the past. And they've got a really, really steep fleet going next year. And he's probably going to have to go against Oscar Piastri going into next year. But I really believe that he will eventually end up in Formula 1 with the team. What team? Probably Williams, most likely, long-term down the road. Depends on how much longer we see the two guys in Williams next year. That being Alex Albon and Nicholas Latifi, how long they'll be there, because Nicholas Latifi is a little bit older of a driver, though he's still a little bit younger. And, of course, you have Alex Albon, who's also going to Williams, returning to F1, and going to Williams in 2022. But I think Logan Sergeant is the best opportunity for American to run well in Formula 1. He's really, really good, and like I said, I'm extremely excited to see that he is going to be coming over to Carlin Racing in 2022. I think is a really, really great pickup, a great asset, and I'm excited to see what Logan Sergeant can do in 2022 in F2. Now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the clash at the LA Coliseum. Now, there's something that's going to be happening to clash at the LA Coliseum. Reported by Adam Stern a couple of nights ago, he says that there will be a break during the main race of NASCAR's Clash at the LA Coliseum for a 10-minute halftime type show by a yet unannounced artist that will be covered by Fox on top of the previous Pitbull concert. NASCAR may also get new USC coach Lincoln Riley involved on race day. First of all, Lincoln Riley coming in, great acquisition. USC basically plays at the LA Coliseum. Makes a lot of sense to bring him in. They're seriously doing a halftime show. Are you absolutely serious? And let me explain why I don't really like this, in my opinion. We're not in freaking football. We're not the NBA. This is not even the All-Star game. If this was even the All-Star game, I wouldn't even have entirely a major problem with it. This is the clash. This is a race. NASCAR is different than other sports. I don't know why NASCAR is thinking. Again, I understand that the Clash is a special one-off, is like a special event, and that they're doing it much special this year than previous years with the Clash. But this is the Clash. This is not even, other events. And people are going to say, well, they stopped the race for halftime for the Coke 600. They only stop it for 2 minutes to salute the troops. They only stop it for like 2 minutes. They don't stop it for 10 minutes. And one thing that this is going to do, because a lot of NASCAR fans especially are not going to like it, a lot of people are not going to continue tuning into it. A lot of people are not just going to continue tuning in. So I don't entirely understand what NASCAR is doing right here by having a halftime show in the middle. Again, it depends on what artist you get too. There better be someone that's relevant, because again, I like country music. It better not be a country artist. It needs to be someone that's kind of relevant, it's hip, is really, really popular, and is not someone that is basically out of their prime from 10 years ago. I like a lot of artists, I like a lot of different genres, so if they're going to do this, I mean, it's cool that they'll probably get someone, and people will probably tune in just for the artist, but let's be for real here. Why are they having a freaking halftime show at the LA Clash? I just don't understand it. You have this major event. I get that we're going into a new era of the sport, and the sport is definitely going to be much different in 2020, starting 2022, compared to other years. But man, it really is frustrating to me, the fact that they're doing this. It's really irritating. It gets me really under my skin. It gets a little bit under my skin, not going to lie, that they're having a halftime show for the Clash. I don't understand it. I remember when they did that Sammy Hagar stuff last year for the All-Stars, and I was just like, what are we doing here? That's how I really felt, in my opinion. They're doing a freaking halftime show. I just don't get it. And a lot of racing fans probably saw that, and I'm like, what are they doing? It's really frustrating, really irritating that they're doing, but it is what it is, and we move on, and it is what it is. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Justin Haley, as this number has been officially revealed for 2022. The number that Justin Haley is going to drive for Kaulig Racing in 2022 is going to be the number 31. That's right, they are going to be taking the 31 from basically when the Turner Scott days. I think that Todd Braun used to work in Turner Scott. They are going to have the 31 for 2022. I'll be perfectly honest, I'm a little bit shocked that they've chosen the number 31. I would have thought they went with a number like the 61, the 13, maybe even the 71 if that was one available. But the 31 definitely is a little bit of a surprise. But it maybe isn't always a little bit of a surprise. Again, they basically, like Turner Scott, and Todd said Todd Braun needs to work for, I think, Turner Scott Racing. That basically is probably one of the reasons why they chose the 31. But another reason I think is a little weird too is because, again, they have other numbers they could have honestly chosen. But they went with a number that's a little bit surprising. But again, I think the number is really cool, and I think it's going to be a great addition to it. Again, it's also the first time that the 31 is going to be on the track since 2019. I know some people said it's been 2018 the last time we've seen it. But the last time that this number race was with Richard Childress Racing, and that was in 2019 when Todd Reddick made attempts at Daytona 500 and also ran this Ferrari car at Kansas to a top 10 finish. So, again, I think it's really cool. They are bringing the 31 back. It's been a few years since the 31 has raced, and it's basically a legendary number. Drivers like Mike Skinner have gotten into it. Drivers like Jeff Burton have gotten into it. Neil Bonnet got into it. You know, a lot of drivers have gotten into that number 31 number. So in some ways, it is a special number that hasn't, like I said, been in sport in a couple years. But at the same time, it definitely is a little bit surprising that they chose the 31 for Kaulig Racing. That's another number I would have ever thought that Kaulig Racing would choose. 77, I thought he was potentially more likely because Justin Haley's drove into 77 in the past. But I think it's definitely really surprising they went with the 31. So the numbers for next year is going to be the 16 car. That's going to be a car that AJ Allmendinger is going to run, Noah Gragson is going to run, and Daniel Hemmert's going to run his all-star car. And then 31 is going to be the number that Justin Haley is going to run next year. Sponsorship has not been revealed, but most likely Leaf Filter and all his other sponsors are most likely going to be on that 31 car next year as well. And also FOE, which is a little also interesting, is FOE also sponsored 31 back in the Turner Scott days. So I think it's definitely really interesting that they have decided to go with the 31. It's definitely really surprising, and it's really cool to see that that is a number. It's definitely really surprising, and a number that I did not think that they were going to choose from. It's definitely surprising, but it is what it is. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Matt DiBenedetto. Now, Matt DiBenedetto currently at this moment does not have a ride for 2022. And an old sponsor is basically threw a little bit of a jab at Matt DiBenedetto. They posted on Twitter basically seeming to call out Matt DiBenedetto. They said on their Twitter, basically said, so someone from Matt DiBenedetto's camp basically tried to call us. I think it was Tom from Keen Parts. And basically they put a bunch of laughing emojis. What this tells me is, one, it doesn't look like Matt DiBenedetto's old sponsors really are happy with him right now. And Matt DiBenedetto right now, like I mentioned, he does not have a ride going into the 2022 season. He's still currently looking for a ride for 2022. I think Matty D, I'll say this. Matty D has had a lot of teams he's gone through. He drove for Go Fast Racing, which was Keen Parts sponsored that team. He drove for Go Fast Racing for a couple years, then got let go when he went over to Levine Family Racing, took a chance on him. Then after Levine Family Racing decided to basically kick him to the door for Matty D for Christopher Bell, which again, Christopher Bell as a driver is going to end up in there regardless because Levine Family Racing was a toy development team at the time. Matty D went over to Wood Brothers, and then he had his issues with Roger Penske. Roger Penske was not overall most happy with Matt DiBenedetto for that. And Matty D basically went on a sob story. And I think that a lot of Matt DiBenedetto fans, I'm going to just say this, if you're a Matty D fan, I would be a little bit concerned about Matt DiBenedetto going into 2022. Because Matty D, we've not heard anything about him. The only team we've really even heard in the last 4 months to begin with, really since the situation happened, the only team we've heard is Rick Ware. And honestly, I think Rick Ware is going to choose a driver that's already in their drivers that are already in their team currently at the moment than a driver like Matt DiBenedetto. But I will say this. I think Matt DiBenedetto has a lot of talent. He's proven it time and time again. He finished 8th in a BK racing car in 2016. The guy has talent. He was in the JRG development program and did pretty decent in the NASCAR Xfinity Series back in the day. And he won with Vittori Racing in 2011 when it was K&M East. He won races with Vittori. So it's not like Matt DiBenedetto is not a bad driver. I think Matty D is a very, very solid driver. But the issue with Matt DiBenedetto is he doesn't have any funding. And right now in the sport in 2021, going even to 2022, right now sponsorship is everything. And this is not just in NASCAR. This is in all different motorsports. Sponsorship is a major, major part of racing. And you're going to have sponsors if you're going to want to have an opportunity to compete. But at the same time, I hope that he does have a ride. I would entirely be shocked if he doesn't. If have a ride, I'd be really, really shocked. But honestly, the farther we get down into the offseason, because I don't know if you guys noticed, we're only technically 52 days from the start of the NASCAR Cup season, because the Cup season starts on February 6th at the Clash. We're only 52 days technically from the start of the season, and we're only 66 days from the start of the regular season. So we're not too far away. And then you got 64 and 65 days till Trucks and Xfinity Series season basically start. I don't think it'll be completely out of ride, but man, if you're a Matty D fan, you've got to be concerned. Of the big three agents left, Ryan Preece, Ryan Newman, and Matty D, I would say Matty D is the least likely right now to have a ride. Ryan Newman, I think, will go part-time, and Ryan Preece has had conversations, but man, Matty D. And he also, not to mention, sold his Huracan literally like of this past week. So I am a little worried for Matt DiBenedetto, and I am concerned for him. And I hope he does end up finding a ride next year. I really, really do, because I'd like to see him have another opportunity, maybe to climb for the ranks. But let's be honest, when you have an old sponsor basically calling you out, that's never a really, really good sign that a sponsor really, really likes you. So overall, it is what it is, and hopefully he will find a ride, but I'm not entirely confident that he will find a ride for 2022. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Hailie Deegan. And as expected, Hailie Deegan will return to DGR Racing in the Camping World Truck Series in 2022, driving the number one truck once again. Hailie Deegan drove the one truck in 2021, and her expectations were a little bit really, really high, but she really did not do that amazing in 2021. Though I will say the lack of practice qualifying, I do think did overall affect her performance on the racetrack. I do like Hailie Deegan. I've been a fan of hers for a very, very long time. But like I said, her season was not really, really exceptional. Though she did get a top 10 at Kansas. She did have one top 10 at Gateway. And she had some pretty decent runs. She ran pretty well at Texas for a speeding penalty. And she also was running in the top 7 or 8 most of the time we were at Kansas. The first time we were there before, unfortunately, having problems late in the get-go. But Hailie Deegan in 2022, she is going to be expected to perform a little bit better next year. You're going to have some of your big competition going up to Xfinity. You've got Austin Hill and Sheldon Creed, 2 drivers who made the playoffs going up. You've got Todd Gillen who's moving up to the Cup Series next year. 3 drivers who made the playoffs. So she's going to have 3 less big competitors she's going to have to deal with next year. But she's also still going to have a lot of competition going into next year, like a Chandler Smith who was coming on strong. John Hunter Nemechek. But she is going to be expected to perform better. Her expectations, 1, she's going to have to start finishing the top 10 more consistently than just once. And I think she'll do a little bit better. I think the more experience she has in practice golf and come back, I think she'll do a little better. But her expectations are going to be really, really much higher going into next year. She's going to have to try to make the playoffs. I'm not saying that she needs to make the playoffs next year, but she needs to be all around making the playoffs. She needs to perform better. I think she finished like 16th or 17th in the regular season points in trucks, which isn't too bad considering, like I said, the truck competition last year, though it was a wreck fest last year. The truck competition was really, really high. but she is going to be expected to perform a lot better than she did. She's going to have a lot of higher expectations, and she's going to have to perform better 100%. So if she doesn't perform better, people are going to call her a bust. And I don't like people calling her a bust. I think she still has potential to do well. The other big thing for Hailie Deegan going into next year is, will she make some NASCAR Xfinity Series starts? Because she has said that she does want to make NASCAR Xfinity Series starts in 2022. That's something we're going to have to wait and see if that happens. But if she does make Xfinity Series starts, that most likely will come with the Team Penske group if they decide to stay around, or that will come with SHR, because SHR has been rumors potentially of a second SHR Ford car in 2022. Maybe Mark Andretti makes some starts. There's been rumors that Tony Stewart can make a start at Indy Road Course, and there's been rumors that maybe Hailie Deegan can also run as well. So it's definitely really interesting. She's returning. My expectations for her, she needs to finish more in the top 10. She needs to start getting some top 5s and some top 10s and start leading more laps than she has. She didn't do amazing last year, and she's got to start doing better next year. This is her second year. I think she will improve next year, though. I think she'll be a little more consistent, and hopefully, though, she will improve and do better going into 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we are talking about Jimmie Johnson. As was announced yesterday on the Today Show, that Jimmie Johnson is going to run the full IndyCar season in 2022 for Chip Ganassi Racing in the number 48 car in 2022. Carvana will sponsor him for 16 races, and American Legion will sponsor him for 2 races, including one of the Iowa races in 2022. I am really, really shocked that Jimmie Johnson is running the full IndyCar season in 2022. I'm not surprised that he's running the Indy 500. That had already been confirmed from Chip Ganassi themselves. They already confirmed that Jimmie Johnson was going to run the Indy 500. But I am extremely shocked that Jimmie Johnson is going to run not just the Indy 500, but is also going to run all the other oval races as well, including Texas and Iowa. This really, really surprises me, which means that Jimmie Johnson will run every single event in 2022. He basically wanted to run the road course, and then that kind of changed when he did the oval test at Texas and the Indy 500 as well, which means he did also get approved to test that as well and gets a race. But I will say this about Jimmie Johnson. His expectations going into 2022, they are going to be a little bit higher. But I will say this as a person who watched pretty much every single IndyCar race, he really did have a really, really big learning curve he had to go through. And as the year progressed, his pace got much, much better. He was starting to consistently run in the top 15s, and basically was starting to get close to that top 15 range, was finishing the top 20. As a matter of fact, the last 2 races of the season at Laguna Seca, and I think it was Portland too, if I remember correctly, he ended up Long Beach and Laguna Seca, he ended up finishing 17th in the final 2 races, and he was starting to perform a lot more consistently in the top 20, and his pace was getting better. He was keeping up with guys. He had, at beginning gear, he was like a second off of the pace of guys in the field. And then he started getting closer and closer as the year went on. And he basically said that one of the reasons it said was, I got to be braver. I got to do a little bit better, and I got to perform a little better, which as the season progressed, he got better. But his expectations are going to be a little bit higher next year because Jimmie Johnson, of course, is getting in a Chip Ganassi racing car. And Jimmie Johnson, I think, is one of the greatest drivers ever to race a motorsports car. Get him in a car, he'd probably do really, really well. But he had a major learning curve going from NASCAR, transitioning from NASCAR and these big, heavy stock cars into an open-wheel car with really big downforce. And Jimmie Johnson was still learning. And I will say this for Jimmie Johnson, he did improve last year, but his expectations are going to be better. He needs to start forming in the top 15 and needs to start getting some top 10s next year. If he starts getting top 15s and top 10s, I'm very confident Jimmie Johnson will be in the sport for a long time. And I do think that long-term, Jimmie Johnson is going to be in IndyCar for a long time. I think he wants to compete in the sport. He really, really likes what he's doing. He's enjoyed it. And, he's had, like I said, has had a major learning curve to go through. But the fact that Jimmie Johnson's going full-time next year, I think is really, really great for IndyCar. Because one thing this will do is, one, it will skyrocket the ratings. Jimmie Johnson has a lot of NASCAR fans who are going to tune into it because Jimmie Johnson still has a big presence in NASCAR. And, of course, there's also talk maybe he's going to run the Rolex 24 and the 12-hour Sebring as well, if that's not already been confirmed. It's likely that he's going to run for both of those as well, most likely for Chip Ganassi Racing next year. But like I said, I am extremely excited that Jimmie Johnson is officially going full-time at IndyCar next year. I think that this is an excellent pickup for IndyCar, having run the full season. And not to mention, for the Indy 500 too, you're going to have an extremely good rookie class next year for the 500 if these guys make it. Kyle Kirkwood, the Indy Lights champion. Romain Grosjean, who's going to be going to the 28 for Formula One. He's going to be in 28 for Andretti Autosport. Jimmie Johnson. You're going to have Callum Ilott in there. And Dave Malukas is going to be in there next year. And maybe even Kyle Larson is going to show up for the test, is going to show up to the Indy 500 as well, maybe for Team Penske. But I think it's really, really exciting, really, really cool that Jimmie Johnson is coming over to IndyCar. I think it's a great pickup, but his expectations are going to be a little bit higher. He's going to have to perform a little better, but if he can do that, I think that's really, really good, and hopefully he will do well enough to contend a little bit more than he did. I think he has a chance to do it, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with Jimmie Johnson going to 2022 at IndyCar, but he will go full-time at IndyCar in 2022. I am extremely excited to see what Jimmie Johnson can do in 2022. And now we're going to head on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about day one of the next-gen test that took place yesterday. NASCAR had a next-gen test. Basically, we're doing a couple extra tests because there have been a lot of concerns about the 550 horsepower test that happened about a couple of weeks ago in November. Drivers have been really, really concerned with how low the speeds were. The speeds were really, really down. So that's why they were there yesterday to test the next-gen car. They had 3 different configurations that they tested. Number 1 was a 550 horsepower package with the 7-inch spoiler. Test number 2 they have on the later day will be the 670 horsepower with the 6-inch spoiler with the center spoiler. And the final test, test number 3, will be 670 horsepower with a 6-inch spoiler with a shark fin and a deck fin. They would have test number 1, and the speeds were about 31 seconds, but they were starting to get into the 30-second range. So they were a little bit faster with the 550 horsepower package than they were in this test. But again, temperatures may have played a major part in ruling that, but they were faster than November. But I will say temperatures probably played a major factor into that. Then they tested in a pack later in the day. And I'll say this, it was a little bit better than what I saw. It was a little bit better from what I saw here. You could do a little bit more passing, but it was still extremely difficult to pass. I do think, though, it was a little bit better than having the 8-inch spoiler. They did, like I said, drop it down to 7-inch spoiler, but again, it was still very difficult to pass, especially the aero configurations, and they were visibly slower than the other 2 packages we'll talk about here in a second, but that was that. On top of that, in that test, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. actually spun out. And I thought Ricky Stenhouse Jr. got a lot of damage. Well, what they ended up actually doing was they brought a tire out to the track and they changed the tire on the racetrack. So that's what ended up happening for Ricky Stenhouse Jr., why it took so long for him to get out there. But I saw that live and I was like, wow, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. basically had a really lazy spin. And that was one of the weirdest spins I've ever seen. But he spun out in this test as well. Then they took a little bit of a break to do the new configuration on the cars. And they ended up starting the second test where they were running the 670 horsepower package with the 6-inch spoiler and the center spoiler as well. The speeds were in the 30 seconds, and as a matter of fact, they actually got into the 29.6 seconds, which, comparison to the pole times, that would have been the pole sitting time for 2021 for the Coke 600 that Kyle Larson would have set. That would have been the pole position. Now, during that section as well, the test, Tyler Reddick actually spun into the tire barriers. He crashed really hard during that and had a ton of damage on his next-gen car, but was really surprising. He really didn't look like he got a lot of damage. He hit the tire barriers hard, but didn't get a ton of damage on that car. Then they tested the cars in a pack, and it looked really promising from test number 2. It wasn't as good as the next test we'll talk about, but cars could pass, and there was you heard it too in the test. There was off throttle time in turn 3 and turn 4, and cars had to get out of throttle, and you saw packs pull away, and you didn't see these cars stay together, and you could get side by side and actually could pass, which is really positive. Then test number 3 came around, and they had the shark fin and the deck fin test. The times were 30.6, which is a little bit slower than what we had earlier, but again, these were not qualifying trims, so that's probably why that's the case. Then they had the pack test for test number 3, and I will say that what we saw in test number 3, number 1, speeds were up from 550 to 670. That's one thing. There was a comparison that was put up by Christian Espinoza. You should go check that out. There was a test made that were brought up, and the speeds were visibly faster. On top of that, the 680 horsepower package, the final test with a shark fin and the deck fin, that was probably the most positive I've seen from the next-gen test so far, especially intermediates. I like what I saw. You could pass, you get side by side, and cars got loose, and off throttle time, and car control and all that stuff. Also, Kyle Busch, I think it was during the third part of the test, he actually got really loose and got sideways, but was able to save it. Because car control, you're still going to have car control, but these cars also still have no side force. But I think they had a little bit of side force in this, but not as much side force. Kyle Busch was able to save it. So, what we can analyze is there's a couple things that also came out from Bob Pock as well. And he said they're still checking around, but sounds like consensus from today's test is that the second package tested, the 690 horsepower package with center spoiler, is what drivers like best today, to be determined on testing plan on Friday. And then just a few hours ago, Bob Pockris actually reported and said that looks like they'll be testing more with the 690 horsepower package, and there's talk that they maybe reduce the size of the spoiler as well. For me, what I saw at the next-gen test, I saw was extremely promising, especially with the other two tests. I think NASCAR needs to 100% in my opinion, if the test goes well on Friday and they do 670, if they do end up having a lower spoiler, maybe down to 5 to 4 inch spoiler, similar to what they're going to do on the short track packages and the smaller oval tracks, they need to, in my opinion, go with the 670 horsepower package, and if they can, reduce spoiler a couple inches. But I will say that what I saw for the test yesterday, especially from the packs, I thought was extremely promising. And again, there is going to be day number 2 of testing on Friday, which we'll discuss here on Saturday as well. But I think one thing I will give NASCAR a lot of props for is that they could have just not done this test. They could have just said F it, and they didn't have to do this next-gen test. But NASCAR saw that a lot of drivers were concerned and that a lot of fans were not really happy with what they saw. And NASCAR realized, you know what? We got to listen to the fans and we got to listen to drivers a little more. And we're going to give fans the opportunity and a chance to see what is going on with it. And again, I give NASCAR a lot of respect. And I have to respect NASCAR for doing this and giving it out. And like I said, what I saw is from the test, second and third test, is really, really promising. Regardless of which one they decide to go with, I have no problem if it's higher. It needs to be higher horsepower, though. If they have a higher horsepower, I think it's going to be better for everybody, and it's going to be overall better for the fans. So there'll be another test, and we'll talk about day 2 of the testing later this week, but that is day 1 of the next-gen test, and there's a lot of positives that have come out from day 1 of the next-gen test. So anyway, that is it for today's NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, turn notifications on so you be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my page as well. Links scheduled below for that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about day 1 of the next-gen test? Did you like what you saw in the next-gen test or no? Let me know in comments below. And what are your thoughts about Jimmie Johnson running full-time in IndyCars in 2022? How do you think he'll do? What are your expectations? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great and awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.